Thanks once again for dropping by the channel. If you like the content, if you're new to the channel, please hit subscribe, share the video if you enjoyed it, felt it was useful. I also have an Instagram page below, it's in the description, links in there, so go give that a follow. You can just DM me video requests or whatever you want. Let me know. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let's get into this. So, I watched Ade's video the other day where he was talking about Joseph Parker potentially fighting Michael Hunter next. You know, he wasn't saying that fight's being talked about. He was just kind of giving his 2 cents on it, saying it's a fight he'd like to see. And I have to agree with him, it is a good fight. Now, it's a very good fight. Michael Hunter's underrated at heavyweight. No, he really is. Michael Hunter's a good, solid fighter. And, you know, I think if he was to drop down to cruiserweight, he'd be an absolute beast at that weight. But he's content on staying at heavyweight. And, you know, more to him, I think he's gonna upset some heavyweights, definitely, because he's a good fighter. I also mentioned that, and I think in a previous video, that there's talk of him potentially fighting Junior Fa next in New Zealand, which I think is a decent enough little scrap. Junior Fa is nothing to write home about, but it'd be a decent enough fight in Australia anyway. Got me thinking. Joseph Parker's come to the end of his 3-fight deal with Matchroom. So what's next for him? You know, I know Ade's done videos about this, but kind of it's a good question because you're like, well, what is next for this guy? Because we look at guys like Demetrius Andrade, who signed the 3-fight deal with Matchroom. They got fed easy fights, you know, reasonably. You know, I mean, like he fought that Akabov guy, reasonably easy fight. You know, fought Luke Keeler, complete mismatch, but he was getting well paid for those fights. So obviously he decided to re-sign and, you know, keep making that money. With Joseph Parker, he's had 2 fights out of the 3 fights, and he's fought Alex Leopold, a guy who was 5 or 6 years past his best, and even at his best was fringe world level at best. So that was a nice easy fight. Then he fights Shondell Winters, a 40-year-old cruiserweight, basically. You know, Winters had a little bit of talent there, to be fair, but whatever talent he had, you know, he was 10 years probably too late. So, you know, those were the 2 fights he had, 2 easy gimme fights. But you wonder what his 3rd fight's going to be. You know, you do. You wonder who is he going to have for his 3rd fight, because he may or may not re-sign with Matchroom after this. You know, if he gets given a dud for his 3rd fight, maybe Parker will be like, you know what, I don't care if he's giving me, you know, X amount of money. I can't get up for these fights. I'm getting duds. I want title shots. I want big fights, big names. So, I was doing a video about Deontay Wilder being ranked in the rankings of heavyweight, and I said, right, let's have a look at some of these rankings and, you know, see what we can gain from this. Now, Joseph Parker's highest rank is with the WBO, and obviously with the WBO, Alexander Usyk is number 1. He's mandatory for Anthony Joshua. He's fighting Derek Chisora next. We know Parker was meant to fight Chisora at one stage. Spider Bite came into fruition. You know, it was what it was. That fight didn't happen. Would have loved to have seen that fight. Now, it's not a gimme that Usyk Chisora will happen, given the way, you know, everything's being cancelled now at this stage. You know, literally everything. So I don't know if that fight is a gimme or not in terms of it even going ahead, but you would imagine Usyk could win that fight, and you would imagine Usyk, depending on how Wilder Fury goes in terms of, you know, matchmaking, stuff like that, it'd be interesting to see when he'll get that mandatory. He may decide to take an interim fight, in which case him versus Parker as the final eliminator would be a good fight. Might even be for a vacant title. You know, if the whole AJ situation gets dragged on too long, you never know what might happen. So those are good. That's a good fight. I wouldn't mind seeing Usyk versus Parker. I think it's unlikely at this stage we'll get that. In terms of Chisora, depends how he looks against Usyk. You know, Chisora really, I said it before, he's capped with 9 lives. If he loses to Usyk, which I think is highly likely, be his 10th loss, people would probably still want to see him fight Parker. And I would. You know, it depends on how much of a beating he takes against Usyk. Might not take necessarily a bad beating, but people still want to see him against Parker. As we look down the rankings, I'm looking at the WBO specifically. We have Adam Kalnacki, number 3. That's going to change. You know, this hasn't been updated since he lost to Helenia. So that's probably going to get updated, probably going to slide down. So we'll cross him out. And he's PBC anyway. Andy Ruiz, rematch. Interesting. Can't see that happen. They're probably going to, again, PBC. Can't see that happening. Daniel Dubois. Dubois has been calling for that fight, believe it or not. I can't see that fight happening anytime soon, but I think that's an interesting fight, definitely. With Junior Fa, talked about that. I can see that fight happening in New Zealand. Maybe a homecoming for Parker's, you know, 3rd fight Matchroom. They do good numbers, I'd say, in New Zealand. Michael Hunter, good fight, very good fight. Now we have the guy Evgeny Romanov, the guy who knocked out Wilder in the amateurs. He's still pretty fresh in his pro career. I can't see them putting him in with Joseph Parker. I don't even know I think is he promoted by Bob Arum or PB? I don't know. He might even be promoted by Slater, I think. I'm not sure. Chisora at number 9. Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing that fight. Then the kind of from 10 to 15, apart from Hrgovic, it kind of gets a bit, who's he? It's not a who's who, it's a who's he. We've got, oh my god, at 15 we've got Fuji Kujimoto. Don't want to see that fight. Thanks, but no thanks. 14, Hrgovic. I reckon they're going to do Hrgovic versus Hughie Fury. We've got a guy called Dempsey McKen. Never heard of him. I have to say. Tom Schwartz, number 12. Please, for the love of God, no. And then a guy, Frank that's the 27-year-old Cuban guy. The guy who's a year older than me. He looks about 13, 14 years older. So yeah, when you get into the 10 to 15 of WBO, it's not exactly a who's who. It's really a who's he. I want to see who this Dempsey guy is before I do anything. He's actually Australian. Oh, he's Australian, so maybe they might look at doing something with him. 18-0, 12 knockouts, 6'6", from Australia. Absolutely no names on his resume that I even remotely recognise. So, they're kind of some of the options for Joseph Parker. Pull the mic there. There's some of the options for Joseph Parker moving forward. It'd be interesting to see what he does next, because I like watching Joseph Parker. I think when he lets his hands go and he uses some of his traits, he can be very explosive and very fun to watch. I do think Parker, lately, he's been trying to box a lot more, which I don't think is good for him, and as well as that, his weight, he's been coming in the mid 240s, very heavy. I think Parker's best weight is in his 230s, so depends who he's fighting next. You'd want to see him kind of come down a bit lighter and use his hand speed, when he's in the 230s, his feet are a lot quicker than when they're in the 240s. They're very plodding when he's in the 240s. But it'd be interesting to see where he goes next, or who he fights next. Naming off the top 10 that I just did there, it's an interesting one, naming it off, because there's some decent names there and there's some pretty poor names. So I think the most likely is probably that Junior Fan meeting in New Zealand. I think Eddie Hearn will give him a homecoming, and I reckon he'll do a good number. Parker's a big name in New Zealand, and I reckon him against Junior Fa will do good numbers. Even though Junior Fa is not a massive quantity, probably outside New Zealand, maybe not even in New Zealand, it's a domestic clash. Domestic clashes in the home country, even if it's not the greatest, they do tend to get the fans out. There's a bit more energy for them, especially when they're not in big boxing countries. So like when you talk about domestic clashes in Ireland, which has not got a lot of boxers in it, and you've got, even in the UK, which has a lot of fighters in it, good domestic clashes, they just tend to bring the best out of the fans, they bring the best out of fighters. So I personally think we're going to get Junior Fa next, just personally, in New Zealand. But it'd be interesting to know your thoughts down below. Let me know. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, of course, if you are new. And as always, I will talk to you after.